Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, organizers of the United Nations International Meeting on the Question of Palestine. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in this important event. I'm pleased to be here today on behalf of the Local Aid Coordination Secretariat in the State of Palestine to speak in particular about maximizing the effects of aid assistance. I have a presentation, right, great. So please, next slide. Mildly, just to explain aid assistance for the purpose of development effectiveness, which requires that development, trade, finance, diplomatic, and security policy communities to work together as a precondition for growth and poverty reduction. Aid effectiveness is a tool to support development effectiveness through accountable, transparent, and results-oriented use of foreign aid for development effectiveness. Next, please. And in particular, aid assistance in Palestine is very closely linked to Palestine's ability to control its own resources, and particularly the issue of sovereignty. Sovereignty translates into the state's control over its income and the way it is dispersed for the purpose of developing a prosperous future for its citizens. In November 2012, the United Nations General Assembly adopted Resolution 67/19, awarding Palestine non-member observer state status, despite the political significance of this resolution for the issue of Palestinian statehood. The status quo on the ground remains, and Palestine is still not able to exercise full control over its territory. However, my intervention will leave aside larger political issues. As you have heard from today's session and yesterday's, it's very well covered, and will limit itself to looking at the evolution of aid assistance and coordination since 1993 and outline some of the lessons learned on maximizing aid assistance. Next, please. I will go and just explain to you, and this might be a little bit, hopefully it's easy to follow, but it gives you kind of a chronology, how aid coordination structure evolved from Oslo to statehood currently. It started by signing of the Oslo Accords in 1993 by the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the government of Israel, which followed by an influx of donor assistance. In the same year, the Ad Hoc Liaison Committee, AHLC, a 15-member committee that serves as the principal policy-level coordination mechanism for development assistance to the Palestinian people at capital level, was established. The HLC seeks to promote dialogue between donors, the Palestinian Authority, and the government of Israel. More about this composition will be also in my paper that will be distributed after my speaking. As a result of the aforementioned, an elaborate set of aid coordination arrangements was developed in the West Bank and Gaza, shaped by the political context, which brought with it large sums of aid with the aim of securing the peace process and nurturing the birth of the Palestinian Authority. The coordination structure that was developed at the time, named the Local Aid Coordination Committee, which was referred to as LAC, embodied a tripartite principles: Israel, Palestine, and the international community. It was donor-driven with a top-down approach. However, in 2000, when the Second Intifada erupted, the coordination structure faced a humanitarian crisis and very restricting measures on movement and access. In response, donors prioritized humanitarian support and quick disbursement projects, which resulted in tied and uncoordinated aid. At an HLC meeting on the 14th of December 2005 in London, it was decided to restructure the current coordination mechanism to a newly created local aid coordination structure, which is referred to today by LACs, for the purpose of improving the effectiveness of aid coordination in providing a coherent technical assistance and financial support, which is based on national priorities to the Palestinian people and in line of the OECD Paris Declaration, and aid effectiveness. The PA formally joined and endorsed the Paris Declaration in early 2009. This structure has remained largely unchanged since 2005 and has enabled the PA to play a much more significant role in the setting of aid priorities and allocation of aid. At the local level, the Local Development Forum is at the core of the local aid coordination system, and it is co-chaired by the Palestinian Authority, which is represented by the Ministry of Planning and Administrative Development, Norway, the World Bank, and the United Nations Special Coordinator's Office for the Middle East Peace Process, UNSCO. Also, you will find more details in my paper. I would like to go to the next slide and just give you a little bit of a view what the structure looks like. This is just a diagram to portray the complexity of the aid management structure in Palestine, showing the different groups from capital to local level. Within the red box, you will see the capital level, and the green box is the local level. This structure houses most of the international community, along, of course, with the PA as leading on the different groups. And we have a website you can explore. Next, please. On national capacity, during this time and over the past few years, the PA has made significant strides in increasing its governance capacity, exercising ownership within the coordination structure, which includes key Palestinian institutions, donors, UN agencies, the private sector, NGOs, and other members of civil society. Whereby in September 2011, the HLC welcomed the assessments of the World Bank, the IMF, and the UN, which stated in their respective reports that the PA was above the threshold for a functioning state in the key sectors they had studied, namely improved quality of its public financial management, continued to strengthen its institutions, delivering public services, promoting reforms, and the sufficient functioning of government sectors in areas such as governance, human rights, rule of law, education, health, social protection, livelihoods, food security and employment, infrastructure, water, and sanitation. I'd like to speak a little bit more about the predictability of aid. Since the September 2011 HLC meeting, there has been little progress on the peace process and further negotiations with the government of Israel, which has been the main cause for the current PA's dire fiscal situation. As a result, a shortfall in the revenue side, particularly in domestic revenues, that can be attributed to the following: slowing down in the growth of the economy, as it declined from an annual average of about 11% it was 11% in 2010, 2011, to 6% during the first period of 2012, from January to September, due to continued restrictions and movement and access, and a decrease in overall donor assistance, which is particularly relevant in light of the PA's high level of dependency on aid assistance. The shortfall in international financial assistance has contributed to the PA's fiscal crisis. In 2012, the gap between budget assistance requested and that received from the international donors was $694 million. Of that, $559 million for development. And in 2011, it was $438 million. Of that, $163 million for development. The last HLC meeting of this year in March 2013, it called on donors to continue the provision of adequate and predictable assistance to meet the recurrent financial requirements for the PA in 2013, which is estimated at $1.2 billion, with due regard to burden sharing and to assist in broadening the economic base for Palestinian economic development. I wish also to bring about PA's milestones and best practices in aid effectiveness. As the PA formally joined and endorsed the PA Declaration in 2009, and moreover in 2011, it participated for the first time in the Paris Declaration Monitoring Survey. The efforts of LACS were central in supporting the Ministry of Planning and Administrative Development in facilitating works and needed measures to improve progress made on the indicators in order to implement measures set in the Paris Declaration for each party. In the survey for 2010, the PA reported that 78% of aid was untied, meeting the target. Most donors untied 100% of their aid, with the exception of some large donors. It also showed that strong progress on aid flows, alignment on national priority was at 85%, and that less than 50% of OECD donors utilized the National Public Financial Management System. The PA was assessed a score of B on the program-based approaches. A more detailed summary of the PA Paris Declaration results is also in my paper. However, I'd like to really focus on a very successful accomplishment, education in the sector-wide approach in education. In Palestine, in 2009, the sector-wide approach was put into process in the education sector, while the donor community endorsed the Education Development Strategic Plan as the main framework for donor support for the education sector in Palestine, a process that took 2 years in the making and came to light at the end of 2012, with an overall objective of the agreed and joint financing modality which supports the Palestinian education sector. Reform process in the most efficient and timely manner, namely the implementation of the Paris Declaration principles. Donors that supported the education were committed to the sector-related program approach, OECD, referenced in both Rome and Paris aid effectiveness principles. The partnership principles signed by the parties translated global aid harmonization principles, ownership, alignment, harmonization, managing for results, and mutual accountability into a Palestinian context. However, of course, we have the current challenges and continuing challenges for aid coordination in Palestine. First, the political uncertainty lies at the forefront, as it slows down and creates gaps in the planning process. National ownership is challenged by political turbulence in Palestine. The government of Israel's imposed restrictions on access and movements remains the main obstacle, hindering aid coordination, as territories remain fragmented into areas designated A, B, and C. Also, capturing accurate aid data on funding and providing analysis remains a difficult task, as approximately 130 international organizations, agencies operate in Palestine, in addition to donors not presently locally present. It will be challenging to replicate the commendable sector-wide approach attained in education and other sectors. However, a pool fund has been established for municipal development. The increasing membership in sector working groups has increased inclusion and participation, but comes at a price. As groups get larger, discussions tend to become less strategic and more information-sharing platforms. The involvement of NGOs and other players has improved over the years, but requires constant follow-up. Although there has been an increase in focusing on cross-cutting issues such as gender and disability, there is still a lack of capacity. I wish to conclude by saying, in the last few years, the PA has made remarkable strides in increasing its ownership over aid provided to Palestine. While these efforts can by no means be a substitute for a long-term political solution, they have been critical to paving the way to Palestinian statehood. The division between development and humanitarian aid agendas misses the opportunity to maximize its aid effectiveness. It is important that this momentum be kept up and that key players in aid coordination continue to steadfastly support the PA in overcoming the challenges that have been listed above. Aid that is provided to Palestine should continue to be coordinated through the Palestinian Authority and the local structures and monitored. Also, it should ensure the use of national mechanisms and systems. Thank you.